Hi everyone, Jason here from Spiritual Babies. You've joined us for chapter 3 of the book of Ruth. There's this, and then there's one more, and we're done with Ruth. The previous two episodes, you'll be able to find, there'll be a little question mark that comes up in the top corner. Otherwise, you can find the links to that under this video or on our playlist. Guiding us through the book of Ruth is Rabbi Neely. We're grateful for your time again, Rabbi.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be here.
We're going to jump straight in. Previously, Naomi had two sons. Each of their sons found wives as wives from Moab. The sons died. Naomi tried to convince the daughters to leave. One of them did, and one of them stayed. And the one that stayed was Ruth, who the book is named after. And they returned back to the homeland. Ruth has been working in the fields. She found favor in Boaz's eyes. You can take that how you like. And now we're at a position where I think there's a certain amount of strategic positioning on behalf of Naomi to cement a relationship that would be good for everybody going forward. I think that's fair. So I'm going to start with the first verse here, as I usually do, and then we'll interject as we go. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "Daughter, I must find a home for you where you may be happy. Now, there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight." So we've covered what kinsman means a little bit, but we can talk about that being like a distant relation, or a close relation, any relation. But I guess then they had a much better idea of family. Although it's a funny thing. So I do these Irish Jewish tours of Dublin, and last week I had a group of 9 people and a couple, and one of them came from the couple came from, I think, Denver, and the group of 9 came from Colorado, and they didn't know each other in day-to-day life, but one of them said, "Oh, are you the uncle of a cousin?" And the other one's like, "Yeah, I've got the uncle." "And did you go to this shul?" And they knew the larger circle of connectivity, but not each other.
Yeah, we call that Jewish geography.
Right, that's the term they used. Right.
Whenever you have Jewish people meet, we always find out, what degree of separation there is between us, and usually it's not much.
Right. I just thought it was a beautiful thing to watch. These people didn't know each other existed, really, because the extra step had never been taken. But there they are in the same place at the same time, and it was some connection. It was great. So,
all right. Well,
yeah.
Before we get on to the rest of this, I just want to go over a little bit of verse 1, because what Naomi is saying here is being massaged by the translation that you read.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So for example, the word for home never appears here. Right. What she actually says more concretely, which the translation I understand is going with the word home, is is it not that I should, because it's a rhetorical question, right? Shall I not seek for you, right? Will I not request for you a place of rest? And then it will be good for you.
Okay.
Right. So the idea that you'll be happy is also the word sameach, for happiness is never found in this verse. But it's a much more concrete idea of what makes a person happy. So yes, a home can be a place of rest, but if you don't remind yourself that the thing that's happened right now is that Ruth is loose in the world, that she has gone from her ancestral home, she's gone from her father's home, she's gone from what she knew in Moab, and now she is nothing but a beggar in the land of Israel. And Naomi's looking at this and saying, you need to be settled. Right? This is not fair to you. You need a place that you can dependably be a part of. And so for her to say, that's what you need, that's what will make life good for you, is I think a stronger statement than just you need a home to be happy.
I think we may have to explain as well, because a lot of people will never have heard of winnowing or threshing.
Yes, if you're not a farmer, then you don't do that so much. So the idea of winnowing, the idea of threshing is you get grain, and grain doesn't come in neatly milled flour in sacks, but it comes in like large little kernels. And then you have to take that and break it out of the long stalk of wheat, removing the outer shell so that you end up with just the kernels. But then you do that by smashing it against something. But then you've got a pile of smashed bits and kernels that you want, and you have to winnow, you have to sort through that. And the traditional way to do that was to go to a windy place, like a hill, and you would throw it up in the air, and the heavy kernels would fall, and the light rubbish would float away.
Well done. That was a very succinct explanation.
But I should point out that because this was a massive undertaking and operation, you usually would just stay where you did this. And that's why he's sleeping on the threshing floor rather than his house. It was also a security measure.
Right, yeah.
As Rashi points out, especially during the time of the judges, when people were not as reliably honest as they should have been, during this time when you would have lots of extra grain lying around, people would come in and steal. And as much as Boaz was perfectly happy to give to the poor and to help them, that didn't mean that he was happy to just have blatant theft.
Yeah. Okay. So she instructs, so bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. So she's told to make herself pretty and acceptable, and then to go down. I assume then that they were working, and then they were eating, and they were drinking, and then they were sleeping all in the one room.
That seems to be the idea, yes.
Okay. But do not reveal yourself to the man until he's finished eating and drinking, because at that point he's probably a bit more satiated. I feel much better after I've had a full tummy than before.
Absolutely.
When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do. Now, I can remember many years ago now, and I can't remember what the source was, hearing that the term uncover his feet and lie down doesn't necessarily mean uncover his feet and lie down.
Let's get to where that actually happened,
sure.
And then we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But we have a few more verses where we're going to see a very subtle narrative trick that is easily missed.
Okay.
So remember clearly what Naomi has just said, and then pay careful attention to what happens in what Ruth actually does.
All right, you give me hints. All right. She replied, "I will do everything you tell me." She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother had instructed her. Now, it doesn't mention whether she got bathed and anointed and dressed up.
So it's assumed that point went at least more or less correctly, and it assumes that when she went to the threshing floor, she didn't go up and say, "Oh, hey, Boaz, fancy meeting you here." That she kept herself, separate among all the workers that were there. So far, she's following everything as was planned.
Okay. Only that you said it, now I'm paying extra special care. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood, he went to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. She went over stealthily. Now, see, now I'm reading back at what...
So far, she's following the plan.
All right, okay.
This has not happened. So let's go ahead and talk about the foot issue. So yeah, sometime in the 20th century, and I don't know the attribution to which scholar began this idea, that feet was meant to be a euphemism. Now, there's a good reason for that, kind of, which is the phrase that's used for uncovering is used throughout other parts of the Bible, in many cases, to refer to sexuality.
Right.
You will not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife, your mother. I mean,
that's exactly the one that came to mind, is that you shall not uncover that. I think it's something along the lines of the corner of your husband's cloak or something, and it means, or it implies that you're not to sleep with your mother-in-law.
Exactly, right. We don't uncover lots of people, and that in those terms is all meant as sexual, especially in the context of laying down, right? To lay down with someone is absolutely a biblical metaphor for intimacy. However, his response doesn't necessarily imply that there's been an inappropriate intimacy happening here.
Okay.
Some people, I think, wanted to do that because it made a more risque story. And it's certainly possible that the entire episode of this nighttime assignation does definitely have the potential to turn uh, physical, if you will.
Mm.
But I think that it may be overstating the case to think that she is actually exposing his intimate parts. Instead, I think it's much more about on the edge of will they, won't they, rather than her doing something so crass. As I should point out, Rashi argues, in fact, that when she went down to the threshing floor and did as her mother said, that that was actually meant to tell us that she went to the threshing floor as normal, and then is when she washed and changed and all of that, because she didn't want to show up at the threshing floor dressed up like a harlot.
Oh, right, okay.
Because that would have given the wrong impression.
Mm.
So I think that we can have a sort of will they, won't they moment about this, and the uncovering is certainly meant to hint at certain issues, but it doesn't mean that she was actually uncovering anything other than his feet. Right? It's more about the initiation than it is about consummation.
Mm.
Now, and there's other reasons why the uncovering of the feet, right? So one could be a question of intimacy. Another explanation that I heard that I thought was very astute is this is a really good way to wake someone up. Right? You're in the middle of the night. The guy's been exhausted from work. How do you wake him up without actually like shaking him, without doing something that's going to be more forceful and more intrusive? Simple. You just pull the blanket off of his feet, and his feet are going to get cold, and then he's going to wake up to try and adjust his blanket.
Mm.
So it works quite well as just a good technique for waking a person up.
Would it be? So I'm aware that this is like 2019, and people did things differently. Would it have been like a subservient thing?
So certainly the idea that she would be laying at his feet is definitely seen as being a subservient posture.
Mm.
So there's definitely that, and she's going to go on and call herself indeed his handmaid in just a few verses. So there's definitely this deference that's going in the positioning.
Okay. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet! !
Which doesn't, of course, exist in the text. No punctuation in the original.
How does it? Is that kind of close to what the text would say?
Oh yeah, I mean that's fine, And there was a woman lying at his feet is exactly what the end of that verse says. And the phrase, hine, which introduces this clause, is usually an expression of like behold. So they took the behold and turned it into an exclamation point, which is fair.
All right. Who are you? He asked, and she replied, I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. Now, I'm assuming that you can't just go up to a kinsman and say, can I borrow your blanket? And this has a much deeper meaning.
Okay, so there's a lot going on with this phrase. So first of all, remember how I told you to pay attention? What was Ruth supposed to do when he woke up?
Oh, I'm going to cheat by skimming up the page.
That's why it's written down.
When he lies down, he will tell you what you are to do. I don't think she's supposed to talk to him at all.
Exactly. Right. So remember how you were talking about the idea of, is this subservient? Is this meant to be, passive? And she's not being passive. Right. She's not waiting to see what his reaction to her is going to be, of whether he would go down the mistaken assumption that she was there for intimacy, or whether he's going to do something else. She pipes up and tells him what he's supposed to do.
Right.
She's giving him instructions.
Now that's interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, because he would have been at the top of the pyramid when it came to command, and also her likelihood then the next day to eat. Because so far he's been very generous to her, and as she annoyed him, he could just cut that straight off. Secondly, if she must have had an understanding of what the boundaries were of what she could ask for, or what the etiquette was at the time. For her to, basically, I think she's saying, "You're my redeeming kinsman, therefore." you have the right and the power to make me your I'm going to say wife or a wife. So she must have known that that was a possibility.
Exactly. I mean, she clearly understands Jewish law.
Right.
And one other thing I want to point out just poetically that the translation misses is that the phrase she uses for spread over me is your wing, not your robe.
Oh.
Right? Because it's literally saying wing. Now, metaphorically, of course, this is saying, to extend your protection over me. But unfortunately, if people are going down the intimacy phrase, then when it says spread your robe over me, it sounds very much like let's share your blanket. But when it says spread your wing over me, spreading a wing over somebody is an expression of protection, of care. It's an imagery taken from birds, where a bird will flutter its wings over its chicks. And that seems to be more the context, of course, with the idea of redemption that she is looking for here. And of course, that also harkens back to the idea of God protecting us under his wings.
Because there's a direct reference to that picture in the text with birds and wings and protection. And some little bell is ringing that there's a reference as well with the kind of the picture of Talit.
Absolutely, yes. And there is a custom in the Sephardic world especially of having the husband spread his talit over the bride during the wedding ceremony.
Right, okay. All right, we're at the end of that line. He exclaimed, "Blessed, be blessed of the Lord," in capitals, so he said the word. We covered that in the last episode. We can go and look at that.
Right. That means it's actually God's name.
Of the Lord.
I'll go ahead and point out that it doesn't say exclaimed. It just says he said.
Okay. So the exclamation mark after daughter's not there either. All right.
No.
Be blessed of the Lord, daughter. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first.
Right. And I'm sorry, the translation is really bugging me in this because it doesn't say daughter, it says my daughter. Now, I know they are probably trying to avoid any implication of incest.
I see.
But by saying my daughter, it's a statement of connection and of care. It's not a statement of actual biology.
Yeah.
So it's just silly that the translator felt the need to remove the my from my daughter.
Yeah, it's such a tiny thing. I mean, you kind of get what it's coming from with the daughter alone. I don't think that adding a my in there, any more than if I was walking down the street and an older gentleman referred to me as son.
Or my son.
Right.
You wouldn't think, Dad.
No. Yeah, why didn't you tell me? You owe me a lot of Christmas presents. Right. Okay. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to younger men, whether poor or rich. That's interesting to me because, yeah, I mean, she's there on the because of Naomi's instruction, really. So I don't know why she would have gone for a younger random person over. She clearly understood what the law was and what the etiquette was within the family unit.
Do you understand human mating behavior?
A little. I've had some experience.
Well, it's been my experience that not everybody will do what was considered the most ethical or morally or even economically advantageous thing for themselves. I think the phrase is the heart wants what the heart wants.
Right.
And most younger women will be attracted to younger men, and most younger men will be attracted to younger women as well. I mean, that's just the standard for our species. And what he's saying is that there could have been a younger guy that you would have got your fancy, and it would have been normal for her to have gone to that guy to sustain her, even though Boaz was wealthier, even though Boaz was the more appropriate person because of the family connection. But instead, Ruth has gone where she should, which is to him, despite his age, because he does seem to be, at least some level considerably older than her, and despite the fact that she might have wanted a different guy, she's going with him. Now, it seems like she's perfectly happy with him because her standard is not just on, how many gray hairs he has. But he's saying it's just amazing that that's your character, that that's your personality. But we also have to unpack what was the latest, what was the first deed of kindness? or the earlier deed of kindness, because he says this one is even greater than the first one.
I assumed that was looking after Naomi.
Right. So that's the usual traditional translation or interpretation, is that the Rishon, the first act of loyalty or kindness, was her loyalty to her mother-in-law. It doesn't have to be. It can also be that it's a general statement of her her attitude from his experience of how she behaved herself in the field.
Right.
Remember, she wasn't lounging around. She wasn't flirting with the younger help and other guys. She wasn't behaving immodestly. That may also be what he's talking about. You know, I thought you were something special when I first saw you, and now, wow, you really are. I mean, it could be a more immediate level of his experiences rather than with Naomi, but both interpretations work fine.
Okay. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask. For all the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. So he's clearly done a little bit of homework there, asking about, or he's heard good reports from people.
Right, exactly. And again, he is saying the opposite of what Naomi had predicted. Right? You will do whatever he tells you. And Boaz ends up saying, I'll do whatever you tell me.
Right.
So it has completely flipped. We went into this chapter thinking that Ruth was going to be passive, and she turns out to be active, which has exactly been her MO for the entirety of the book, which is she is not a passive participant in the events of her life. When her mother-in-law says, go home, she said no. When she came back, she said, all right, I need to go provide for us. I mean, she has been taking the initiative time and time again when it would have been more natural for her to be passive, especially as a stranger in a strange land.
It would be an interesting study to go through the whole of the Tanakh and find out how many ladies in the Tanakh who actually have great success are passive, and how many are like are like Ruth or Devorah, and they just go at it and they don't care what anyone says. They're just going to do what they need to do.
Now, I think you would actually want to be a really interesting text. How many women, especially of the named characters, do as they're told?
Right.
Because I don't think you'll find many.
That'd be a struggle.
Well, because there's always some emendation, some modification, some agency that they exhibit. And in all the cases that I can think of, except for the obvious villains, like Jezebel or something, their agency ends up for the better. Right? There's no matriarch, there's no heroine of the people of Israel who just did as she was told, and that's why everything was okay. They all added their own agency, if not were the primary actor of any of the scenarios.
Yeah, it's actually opened my mind up to a whole different kind of concept, because you get people like Noah who did pretty much exactly what he's told.
Yep.
And all the times, really, most of the time, like when Abraham, when he did what he was told in at the beginning of the story with Isaac, got into trouble for that. He blindly followed. And then, but when you argue with God, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Anyway, just a total rabbit trail. But ladies, if you're listening, this is a clear biblical example that you should never do what you're told by your mother-in-law or probably by your husband.
I would just add the word, you should never blindly do just as you're told. That sometimes you need to add your own agency, and that is a very important aspect.
As my wife very rarely listens to me anyway, I'm not losing anything by that statement. Okay. But while it is true I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. So that, I assume, would mean a closer relative down the family tree.
That seems to be the idea here, exactly. That he is a redeeming kinsman, but he's not the only one, and there may be someone else who has precedent.
So the argument you mentioned earlier that some people like to sway the cloak and the feet idea towards some sexual union, surely 13 knocks that out of the water. So it says, stay for the night, then in the morning, if he will act as a redeemer good, let him redeem. But if he does not want to act as a redeemer for you, I will do so myself, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. Now, if I was in a room with, I assume, other people, and I as a woman, if I lay down next to some guy at night time and I was there for the night, I'd get noticed. And if it was, especially if it was a sexual thing, that I'd assume that would be bad. That would, especially if you were going to send off this woman to somebody else as a possible wife. It seems that this would delete. If he was honourable Boaz, I don't think would. I mean, there couldn't have been anything kind of. We call it rumpy pumpy, but there couldn't have been any rumpy pumpy if he was just going to possibly kind of pass her off to somebody else in the morning.
So there is a couple different ways that this gets dealt with. So one is he doesn't necessarily say where she's supposed to spend the night.
Okay.
Right. So the way that you could read this is to say that yes, this is you should spend the night, and in the morning it'll work, and you should lie down till morning, which is basically saying spend one more night without this being resolved, and we'll take care of it in the morning. Now, I agree that there seems to be an indication that this lying down, the staying for the night, is more local, because she does. Right? In the next verse, she actually lays down at his feet. But in the next verse, we also find out that she's getting up at the morning, and she does it before anyone can notice. Okay. Maybe we should read verse 14 before I go to that level of interpretation.
Yeah. Okay. So she lay at his feet until dawn. She rose before one person could distinguish another. Oh, that's straight from Talmud, isn't it? That's when you pray, when you can't tell one person from another, when you can't discern.
That's exactly right. If that's pre-dawn, which means it's not time for doing the tefillah. You have to wait until there's more light.
Okay. She rose before one person could not distinguish from another, for he thought, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. All right, fair enough. That does answer that question.
All right, so he was being honorable, but he also didn't want her to walk home alone at night, because not a good idea. And this was his way of trying to resolve the issue.
That's a fair point, because one of my arguments would have been, why wouldn't she just walk home? But yeah, maybe not such a clever idea. Especially as there would have been other people around at that time of night that have just finished eating and drinking. Maybe not as honorable as him. Right. Okay. And he said, hold out your shawl you are wearing. And she held it while he measured out 6 measures of barley. And he put it on her back. When she got back into town, she came to her mother-in-law, who asked, how is it with you, daughter? She told her all that the man had done for her. And she added, he gave me 6 measures of barley, saying to me, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. So that's quite a nice bridge between Boaz and Naomi.
Although, we don't actually get that quote from him.
Okay.
So, this often happens in the Torah or in the Tanakh in general, where there are statements that are made on behalf of another person that are not always an exact quote of what the other person said. Now, sometimes this is simply because it's normal that we not repeat the quotes over and over again. Right. We let one character say them and not have both. It's just literary style. But in other cases, sometimes the slight editing can be midrashically understood. So, the most famous example is when God edits the answer of why Sarah laughed and leaves out the idea that it's because Abraham is also too old, because he doesn't want to cause any strife between husband and wife.
Right.
But here it could be that Naomi is trying to reassure, Ruth is trying to reassure Naomi that whatever happens,
they're together.
Exactly. You are part of this. I'm not going to leave you behind just because I got this wonderful new guy.
And Naomi said, stay here, daughter, and till you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. And that was the end of 3. So we, like Ruth, are going to hang around until next time to find out what happens. I'm guessing it has a good ending.
Yeah, you can't guarantee that in every book in the Tanakh
No.
because not every book has a happy ending. But this particular one, it's going to work out. Sorry if that's a spoiler.
All right, cool. So I think that was it. You guys, we've got one more episode of this of Ruth, and so I'd like to know what you're interested in us going through next. If you can leave comments on the YouTube channel, that would be great. Share this with your friends. Rabbi Neely has a ton of other tuition through biblical texts and through Jewish law over on his channel. There'll be a link to that too, which you really should go and check out. Make sure you subscribe to his channel. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rabbi, for your time today. I really appreciate it. And,
That's my pleasure.
and we'll be back real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.